go through and get some context for the world at the time of the play Raisin in the Sun. Who can remind us when the play is set? Sometime between World War II and the time the play was published, which is what year? 1959.
Anybody can teach, right? Or teachers are people who aren't successful in other fields and that's why they fell back on it. Or at least teachers get summer off, it's super easy. Or they're done by working by 3.
As students head back to school for the start of another year, many districts nationwide are scrambling to find qualified teachers for every classroom. Some 51,000 teachers quit in May of this year, impacting kids and their families.
The U.S. Department of Education also says there's a shortage. 40 states have lower public school staff levels than they did before the pandemic.
And so when I was in elementary school, I started to think, way back then, I'd like to be a teacher one day. And I started doing things to help other students in the room. Made me feel really super awesome. And that just continued to grow as I went through middle school and high school. And it was always in my mind, this is what I want to do. I really enjoy relationships with students and helping kids learn. And I wanted to pursue it for my career.
Well, it's kind of funny because I didn't originally intend to be a teacher, but I was a history major and a government minor, and I thought I wanted to go to law school. My dad was a lawyer, and I did an intern. I had good grades. I probably could have gotten into law school. I did an internship at the state's attorney's office for 6 months, and I said, you know what? I don't want to be a lawyer. So I thought, what else can I do? And ended up getting into education, and I enjoyed it. Yeah, I like the kids, I like the content, so.
I knew in high school when I was applying to colleges that I did want the option of being able to teach. I didn't know that that was actually what I was going to go into. I actually ended up majoring in linguistics, which is the study of languages, because that seemed really cool too. I considered going into speech pathology for a period, but did a year teaching. I had deferred my program there, did a year teaching, and then decided I wanted to stick with teaching. So I kind of maybe always knew this was something I wanted to do, but was trying to see what my other options were. And then when I finally did end up teaching, I liked it.
And that night I had a dream that I was sitting in my high school English classroom and my teacher was talking, and in my dream I was thinking to myself, like, she's an idiot, and she, in my dream, could hear me, and she handed the chalk to me and said, then you do it. And I woke up and I applied to grad school the next day to be a high school teacher, and I thought I would do it for a short period of time. My plan was actually 5 to 10 years. I thought of it as like, I will give back to the great education that I have had for some number of years, and then I'll do the real thing that will be my career. And here I am 25 years in, and that is now a career.
The district included where I lived, but also included some of the parts of schools that I had taught in Howard County. So I thought I had a chance. And I thought if I could get in, it'd be a good thing for me to do to continue my influence on education. I've done a lot of individual stuff with students, but I thought maybe influencing policy if it turns out I'm smart enough to do it. So I ran.
I mean, the answer is really the students.
Content and the kids.
I really enjoy the relationships I develop with my students.
It's the students. I like the energy. I like the light bulb moment when they kind of get something that they hadn't thought about before, or make a connection to something. As I said before, I like helping others. I was raised with a strong sense that that's an important thing to do in this world, and so I feel like not just teaching like the event or the date, it's some of those skills. It's being able to analyze perspective. It's being able to formulate an argument and support it. And they can take those skills with them in whatever field that they end up pursuing. And so that's why I feel like my job is valuable in that way.
I love building relationships with kids, and it is a gift to have been put into a position where I can build and maintain those kind of relationships. Not very many jobs have that. Just this year alone, I had 2 former students who wrote books and mentioned me in the afterwards of their books. Like, that makes me want to cry. I mean, I got an email yesterday from a former student who was like, I just wanted to thank you and check in. And so that is like a very long-term thing that I don't anticipate that happens, you know, but does happen. But what I am doing in the moment, in the lesson that you just observed, like that is building relationships with those kids. You know, that is laying the groundwork for what I hope will be a lifetime of those kids, of reading, of seeing literature as something that helps them to understand themselves and the world better, who are better critical thinkers, and that whatever it is that they go on to do in their life, to have been like a part of that,
what happens
it gives
to a
me
dream deferred?
tremendous
Like,
pride.
that question,
you know, and people I know
six
who
images. So let's go in
their
order.
jobs are like
We're gonna
they
loop
sell
up
things or they build
Adrienne,
things
first
or
one.
they,
What is
you know,
the first image of
that
what
kind of work I think would make me sad. Like I know that my work has mattered. I know that my work has made a difference to lots of people, you know, who went out into the world and maybe they didn't even remember me, but they remember a thing that I taught them. And I mean, that's immortality, right?
At least in our county, we've had a lot of curriculum changes in a very short period of time. Changes in reading, changes in math, changes in writing. And every time a new curriculum comes in, it requires you starting all over again. And so much work is put into whatever the curriculum was before it was replaced. You finally get to a spot where, okay, you know what you're doing and you have your materials and you know what's going to happen this week and that week, and then all of a sudden you're starting all over again. So that's a part of the increase of workload.
You know, it's hard for a young teacher who's inexperienced. I'm a very experienced teacher, and a couple of my classes are stretching the limits of my patience and capabilities, right? If you throw somebody who's a first or second year teacher in there, they're probably not going to be successful. They're going to be frustrated. They're going to be like, I'm not going to do this for 30 years or I'm going to quit, you know. Sometimes the most challenging classes, the experienced teachers don't want to do them because they're like, why do I need this headache? And the new teachers will quit if they're, you know, it's just not very rewarding to do that. So, and the pay, if the pay was double what it was, maybe people are like, all right, I'll do this. I don't care if it's challenging or you know, I feel like I'm beating my head against the wall, but you know, it's not particularly fun. If you can go do something else and make the same money and it's more rewarding, people are going to do that or make better money, you know, so. You know, if it was fun, people wouldn't worry as much about the compensation. People don't get into teaching to get rich. But if they're not making much money and it's miserable, they're like, right? If they're not making much money and it's very rewarding, they're like, I can do this, I think. That's my perception, so.
For me, I'm mission driven, so I'm willing to be paid less because I believe so much, but not everybody has that privilege to be mission driven, right? I'm married, so I have a partner. So we are a dual income household and my husband makes more money than me. So I have the luxury of being mission driven.
Then there is the pressure of testing. So testing has become a big thing. And there's nothing wrong with testing, but because you do need to know how your students are doing. But it's the amount of time and amount of emphasis that's placed on their performance. It is not realistic. So I have from non-English speakers to children with learning disabilities to just regular students that function normally. And everyone is expected to achieve the same goals. That's very, very challenging. Even working as hard as you can do, changing the curriculum to make it match everyone's needs, that becomes a monumental task.
I work every weekend. I try to take off Thanksgiving weekend. I don't work Thanksgiving weekend. This past weekend I worked about 8 hours. Grading, it's not possible, particularly for English teachers, to get the grading done within the school day. So grading happens at home. The administrative work that takes up our day, we have to do a lot of paperwork related to 504s and IEPs for special needs students. That requires a lot of time. We also have to do like data entry, like for example, in English, there are quarterly marking period assessments from the county, and those have to be administered to the students. Then they have to be scored. Then the data for their scores has to be entered into a separate data platform. I mean, it took me for my one class about 20 minutes just to enter those scores, times 5 classes. So that kind of thing takes up a lot of time. We have a tremendous number of meetings we have to go to. We meet, grade level teams meet some on a weekly basis, so you have to get that into your school day. We also have department meetings, we have faculty meetings, we have 504 and IEP meetings. We have, if we have a student we're concerned about, we need to go and a teacher needs to go and have a conversation with a counselor or administrator. There's an additional meeting.
There's going to be, obviously preparing materials, studying the curriculum, trying to tweak the curriculum so that it matches what will get your classroom interested and motivated in learning the objectives. You always have during the day problems between students that have to be managed, emails from parents. I even make phone calls. I have Zoom conferences. There are also staff meetings, team meetings. So it's a busy day.
Other responsibilities when I'm not directly instructing the class, lots of emails to parents, to administrators, to students themselves, if they're out, if they have questions. There's grading, not one of my favorites, but has to be done. So grading, posting grades, obviously the lesson planning, which is actually something I do very much enjoy, but that's only one part of all the other responsibilities. And covering colleagues' classes if they don't have a sub, because we've also had sub shortages, any required trainings that we need. So there's a lot of kind of those other responsibilities. So that does create challenges with a work-life balance. I remember my first year teaching and I had 2 preps, and Saturday I'd work 8 hours preparing for one of them, and Sunday I'd do 8 hours preparing for the next, and that was just for that coming week. And then I do it again the next weekend. And so that doesn't leave a lot of time for, other things. I mean, the belief that, oh, you have the summers off and that's great, and it is great, like that's wonderful, but I feel like we so need that break because we are working so much throughout the period of the school year. But for the summertime, that's often when I do trainings or when I do other classes of my own to just kind of keep learning, lesson planning for the next year so that it does free up some time throughout the school year.
Every day we get 10 emails about you've got to fill out this form or do this or do that, and almost none of it directly relates to your classes, right? It's legal requirements, or it's something that somebody at the board or has decided is a requirement of the school board is. And usually it's well-intentioned, but in theory it's designed to help kids, but it often makes it so it's harder for teachers to help kids because they're doing all this other stuff instead of trying to create fun lessons or trying to, or the other thing is sometimes the perception, I think, is that unless they put this requirement on us, we're not going to do this stuff, right? We must make the teachers, do these things to help kids, and it's like you're actually slowing me down from what I'd be doing anyway, right? There's always been a curriculum, but there used to be a lot more freedom to be creative and do what you wanted, and now, you know, every teacher is supposed to do the same lesson the same way, more or less, as the other teachers on their team, and I have certain strengths and weaknesses, other teachers have certain strengths and weaknesses, and sometimes you wring that out of the process.
Teachers also want to be trusted, and a lot of the legislation we see which seeks to sort of criticize and evaluate curriculum kind of sends a message to teachers that we don't really trust them. Feel like you're allowed to do your job, and in the very good way you intend to do it, you tend to, you know, not stay.
That really weighs on teachers. That like emotional burden that rarely gets talked about. You know, I think I know my students pretty well. I think English teachers in general tend to know more about their students maybe than some other classes, just by the nature of the writing and the ways that we engage with students. And every one of them is a human made up of a pocket of life circumstances, and many of them are very, very hard. And that really weighs on teachers, how to help kids when lots of times there's little to nothing we can do, but trying to figure out what it is that we can do. How can we use the resources we have in the school and in the county to help kids in whatever way we can. I mean, sometimes it is just me providing emotional support for a kid because I had a kid who came to me yesterday crying because she broke up with her boyfriend, and so she wanted to talk through like how she was feeling about the breakup. So that was probably spent 30 minutes talking to her yesterday. So that's not like particularly dramatic. I mean, it was dramatic for her, but all the way to, you know, other students who I know are in abusive homes. You know, I had a student once write in a journal that her father had a gun in the house and had threatened her with the gun. And so then the police had to get involved, you know, so like all the way up to very big things like that. When you're in the business of humans, they're full of human needs, and that weighs, it weighs. But on the flip side of that, the successes of it are there too. And what a gift when the students write, you know, send me emails years later, like, I'm doing so great now, you know, like that is what I think keeps you in it.
On the good part, I love having the students come and talk to me about what's going on in their lives and finding out the amazing things that they're doing, because a lot of them are doing some super impressive things. On the challenges that they face, the home life struggles that they're dealing with, the academic challenges that they're dealing with. If I see a problem, I will certainly bring it to attention. So whether that's writing the counselor, or the administrator, or the parent, talking to the student, of course. Those are all things I try to do. But I also do try to keep in mind that I have now 42 minutes a day with a class that's usually over 30 students, and I do feel like it's limited what I am capable of doing. And so as long as I feel like I'm getting attention to the issue, I might not be the one solving the issue. But I do, I'm home and I do think about certain kids more and some of the challenges and what I can do or what I should have done or what I can't do. I think that's always going to be there.
Teachers were asked to turn classes into virtual classes, and there really had not been any direct training for teachers to learn. You can't just flip a switch and turn a lesson that was planned in person into a lesson that was planned to be done virtually. Mm-hmm. And teachers just had to do it. And honestly, those flipped lessons were not really that effective, and many teachers knew they weren't.
That first year when we came back and were in person after COVID, I felt like the students, and they were juniors I was mostly working with, were very needy. Like they had lost some of that confidence that they usually have by junior year as to how to do things. There's a lot of anxiety, I felt like, and that was exhausting.
A new poll by C.S. Mott Children's Hospital gathered responses from 977 parents with teens that were between the ages of 13 and 18. 3 out of 4 parents say COVID has had a negative impact on their teens' ability to interact with their friends, and nearly half of the parents say they've noticed new or worsening mental health conditions in their teens.
I think we're still in the post-COVID era as far as all that goes. Students who came back, many of them had developed habits when learning virtually that they had trouble breaking in the group in the classroom. So, they had trouble sitting still because when they were learning at home, they get up and get a Coke or walk around whenever they needed to, not pay attention as much. And there's been a lot of readjustment, and I think it's still with us.
There are other challenges, though. I don't know whether we can link them to COVID or not, but I'd say phones are certainly a challenge. In terms of social interactions, I used to come into a class and be like, okay, quiet down, I'm going to start, and now it's put your phones away and unplug, because they're not talking to each other very much. It's very quiet when I'm not even here. And so, kind of learning how to interact with their peers, not online. So I try to do a lot of, first of all, the phones are away, during class, during tests. I have a learning and charge station. They have to put their phones so that to try to prevent some of the cheating aspects. But for the social part, it's more about turn and talk to your neighbor, or first just say good morning to your neighbor, say hello, and I start the year with that. So by now they're pretty comfortable with those small check-ins with somebody else so that they can talk with someone else. I do group projects. I try to get them talking as much as possible, and I think that's good, but it's still hard for them on the social part. They can do it for the work part, but for the social, I think that's still a challenge for them.
And to me, that is the biggest problem, is the way that this generation, they are so connected to their phones and to the ways that they're using the phones to connect to other people. They cannot be separated from their phones. And I don't know if COVID made that happen. I think it would have happened anyway, but it's really a challenge to keep kids off of their phone, to engage kids in content that is not related to their phones. I think that they intellectually understand the dangers and the ways it's affecting them, but they can't not do it. That's their world. So they're being blamed for it, while there also is no option to them to do anything differently.
And the other big issue that we've seen a lot of is attendance. And I'm talking about chronic attendance.
The pandemic may be over, but American public schools are still struggling with chronic absenteeism, which is typically defined as missing about 18 days of school for any reason. Nationally, an estimated 26% of public school students were considered chronically absent last year. That number surged from 15% in 2018 to 28% in 2021. This, according to data from the American Enterprise Institute.
I feel like years ago, if I had one student who is out for, a lot, 50% of the time, it was because of a medical reason. Everyone knew what was going on. We were aware, we knew kind of what to do. And now I can, on one hand, I can name very quickly 5 students who have been absent for more than 50% of the time since the beginning of the third marking period. And it's just constant, trying to email them, their parents, their counselors, their administrators, not necessarily getting any plan as to what to do, not even really understanding why are they out so much, right? And so if you don't know the cause, excuse me, then it's really hard to know what to do next. And maybe they'll come back for, a day a week, and then it's are we supposed to catch them up on everything? There's very little then interaction where the student takes responsibility and reaches out and says, I've been absent, what should I do? So then it's on the teacher to be what's the plan, right? And so I feel like attendance is something that we know to be in school is what helps the students learn, but we have to get them into school, and that's another challenge.
State education commissioners were told in a letter that they have 10 days to do away with DEI initiatives that the administration finds discriminatory, or lose federal Title I funding, which the majority of city public schools receives for low-income student bodies.
Tomorrow, the American Library Association will announce the most challenged books of 2022. Sex and gender are now overwhelmingly the subject matter being attacked.
Parents, when they're sending their kids to school, they should not have to worry about this garbage being in the schools.
Ammunition for Florida's Republican Governor Ron DeSantis' war on woke.
It's not my job to brainwash them or espouse views and get them to think for themselves. And to play, if they take this position, sometimes I take the opposite position to get them to defend it or as a devil's advocate. But again, I'm a government teacher and I don't want to deal with that stuff, right? I know chemistry teachers and Spanish teachers, usually they don't want to touch that stuff with a 10-foot pole. But yeah, the schools are part of society and society is highly polarized and therefore it's going to show up, the schools. Around the country, I think teachers are about as a cross-section of America as can be, and whether it's in Vermont or whether it's in Texas or whether it's in Oregon or Tennessee or Ohio. I mean, teachers are pretty. They're almost always middle class, in terms of their background, and they are not usually extremists. And so it's just funny that the schools tend to be a battleground for different ideologies and different viewpoints. And teachers get caught in the middle of it sometimes, yeah, so. Because I don't know, are we brainwashing them in one direction or the other? If we are, I sure don't feel like I am. It's not my job to brainwash them, but it is to try to teach them to evaluate different ideas and come up with their own opinion about why and then defend it if in fact they think it's right, yeah, so.
Not only taking a stand, but also having support. And what I'm going to challenge you to do is add in a counter argument. And that's what he was describing at the end. And so in your thesis, going back to our debate, if it was which empire was the more successful empire, you could get points by just saying, the Roman Empire was the most successful because, and you give your reasons why. This is kind of a general structure that we're going to be working with, although you have your counter argument, right? You acknowledge the other side, but then you take your stand and explain why.
You know that there are politicians and other groups like Moms of Liberty who are trying to eliminate the discussion of race in a classroom, which is very difficult to do because you have children of all different kinds of races. Because I have students, particularly students who are black. They're not a majority population here. They already feel like a minority. And one of my students this year, who has very dark skin, was feeling badly about himself. People who are saying things to him are making him feel bad for having black skin. So that was a whole situation that, I handled with his parents and with my class, and things have worked out very well. But those are things that happen. So to say to people you can't discuss race, is really hard to do in today's classrooms. And we're not teaching a college course of critical race theory to children. We're just teaching them this is how you get along with people. This is how you understand this person who may be from a different culture. And I think it's a great opportunity, and I take advantage of it. So any school systems that are being, told not to do those kinds of things, to teach about that, I think that's doing children a disservice because they're going to be adults one day. And they have to manage the world where people do look different.
If it got into a conversation about that, let kids say what they had to say and let them evaluate each other. And I have social studies teachers who are friends who say that's what they do. There's no indoctrination. There's learning how to be thoughtful and how to make decisions wisely and letting kids talk about it. And guiding their conversations so that they're thoughtful is the important thing to do. And, you know, let's be fair. People picture, and I'm very progressive, and I'm a teacher, but not all my teacher colleagues were. Some of them had very conservative outlooks on things. So it's not like we're a bunch of left-wingers running around the side of the school. There's lots of opinions, but we shared them among ourselves. We didn't try to push them on students. So you have to let students capture the world and think about the world, but you have to guide them through the thought process, but not through the conclusions.
Even the lesson that you just saw, right? Learning about like redlining, that can't happen. Like Texas doesn't, you know, their school systems are not teaching things like that.
So in redlining, individual people could make decisions based on race if they wanted to. It went to the banks that were giving loans. They would say, we are not going to sell to a particular group of people that we don't want to live here, right? And that was, as the group mentioned, there were actually maps that showed where communities would sell to people who were black or not, right? That's how redlining worked. And so what we're seeing right now with what is happening in our politics is all an evolution of this.
To not know about the history of redlining and then understand what that literally means for what's happening in our politics right now, right? These are not things that happened forever ago. The second wave feminism is directly related to the way that politics is talking about trans people today. Like, the through line is straight. So to not teach that history, I don't know, it's just, it is truly a tragedy. It is terrifying to think about. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that wakes me up in the middle of the night, like where our country might be headed is really, really, really scary. I try to do what I can with the person in front of me every day and get up and do it again and again and again. And I have done my best to do my part, and I believe that there are millions of people doing the same every day. The arc of humanity bends toward justice. I won't see it in my lifetime, but I believe it will happen someday. So that's it. Woo! I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go so deep there.
If you build it, they will come, okay? If we make a system where it looks attractive, we'll attract people in, we may attract people from other states, and we'll also keep some of the teachers that are here right now because they'll feel better about what they do.
Now, would money solve the problems? No. But, I mean, it does help a little bit to make more money if you're working that hard, especially if you're comparing yourself to other professions where they get, you know, in terms of what they're supposed to be doing and how much value they are as a person in their community. A little bit better pay would also help.
It's trying to educate our population as to some of the challenges that our profession faces, so that by understanding the situation, hopefully we can come up with some realistic solutions and some of the policies that we need and support that we need and funding that we need in order to do those things. And one of the biggest things that all teachers want is more time.
And that's one of the big ones right now. The blueprint has in it that we should move toward having teachers spend 60% of their time in the classroom and 40% of their time on collaborative time, either planning individually, planning with other teachers, working with parents of kids who need help, all those sorts of things. And I think that if we institute that properly, that people will see that this is a really fun profession to be in because you can do your job well.
You know, having maybe some members of our government come and come into the classroom and observe and spend a day, and then they can also better understand some of the issues. Since there isn't more time in the day, it's can we reduce the number of students in the class so that you can have more time for each student? And of course that's funding.
Ideally, classroom sizes would be 20. And you would have a para-educator who would work with each team so that you can work with everyone and all the different kinds of kids and needs we get today in a regular ed classroom. The communities would have to decide to like double their budgets to do something like that. You'd have to increase the size of schools to be able to have classrooms that small.
Teachers don't get in it to make money. They get in it because they want to do it well. And so providing them opportunities and providing them incentives to get better are critical. One of the things that we value in the blueprint is something called National Board Certification. It's a further study that you do as a teacher. It's very hard to pass and very difficult, but we attach to it automatic increases in salary of $7,000 a year if you get nationally board certified. I've asked teachers, so did you do it? Well, yeah, it seemed like a good idea. They were out more money. But I say to them, was it hard? And they say, yeah, it was really hard. They have to videotape themselves and do all kinds of things. I said, do you feel like you're a better teacher because of it? And they said, and they smile, yeah, I do. Because they want to be better. And so they're pleased at the program. It wasn't just a rubber stamp. We show that we value them getting better when we offer salary increases for those sorts of things.
The only antidote to despair is action. Fighting for the Department of Education at the national level and speaking it, right? You don't have to like politically agitate, you don't have to do anything, but just to even speak out loud in your community, education matters. The Department of Education does important work. And then even more importantly than on the national level, doing that within your communities, right? So know who is running for the Board of Education. Vote for the people on the Board of Education who you believe are going to be student-centered and teacher-centered and not business-centered. So be educated on your Board of Education election candidates, vote accordingly, and then help other people to vote accordingly. An educated electorate is a good electorate, right? Be educated about the issues, be educated about who is running, and make informed decisions. That is one thing that people can do that is so important. You can vote for your county council members. You can vote for your, I don't have a mayor here, he's called the county executive. You can vote for your state senators and your state representatives, and then of course your national senators and representatives as well, who prioritize education and speak to educational issues, right? So that is important. And then on a smaller level, you can watch your words when you talk about teachers and education. Speak words of respect. And if you don't feel that way, if you don't feel respectful of education as a profession, maybe learn a little bit more about it. Read books by teachers about what it's like to be a teacher. There are gazillions of them. I mean, Teacher Man by Frank McCourt is one that is just popped into my mind that is excellent. But there are many. There are bad teachers out there, just like there are every bad of every profession, right? Not every teacher is a saint. So don't allow those small isolated incidents that seem to predominate the media. Don't believe that those are everybody.
So the simple way is involvement. Volunteer time, helping teachers, helping students, organizing activities that children can do before and after school, so that communities of people get to know each other.
But I think you should go and volunteer at your schools, because schools are, everybody went to school, so everybody thinks they know what goes on in school, but schools are also an enigma to people in the community, because you're not really just allowed in whenever you want to. And I think people don't see how well they're run, how importantly the teachers take the importance they attach to what they're doing and teaching, and how the school is really going great. They hear about discipline problems, but they're not as common as people think they are. And I really think people should, if they can, and you can, they want you to come in, you get vetted, and you can go and volunteer. Connect with the school. That, if it's your community, you should know what it looks like inside, and you should go there, and you should go there with good intentions, not to make a bad expose or write a bad letter, but really just to observe what goes on. And then, on top of that, you might actually make a teacher's job easier, a school's job easier. Maybe you're working in the media center helping them sort books or something, but there's students there, and you can interact and see that kids aren't as bad as people try to say they are.